afternoon, everyone. My name is Romy Hendricks and I will present this webinar to you about modern gilt rearing and finisher feeding of the tea and duroc. The webinar will take about 1 hour, and if you have questions afterwards, please feel free to send them to me and I can answer them via email. Here you see our disclaimer. The information that I present to you is put as accurate as possible together. However, be mindful that some information may differ in your market situation. My personal disclaimer for this webinar, I am using the live translating in subtitles, as you can see below. I hope everything is translated correctly, and if something is not understandable, please let me know and I can explain it via email afterwards better to you. So here you see the program. First, I will introduce myself and my team. Secondly, I will introduce the modern gilt rearing strategy of Topigs Norsvin, and next to that, the 6 items that matter during that gilt rearing strategy. And lastly, some take-home messages for the first part, and then I will continue with the second part. So let's start first with the introduction. My name is Romy Hendricks. I am 29 years old and I live in the Netherlands. I studied at Wageningen University and Research, and I obtained there my bachelor and my master degree in animal sciences. And since April 2021, I started working at Topigs Norsvin, where my role is a global nutrition specialist. And I'm working in the team that is called Global Nutrition and Female Reproduction Services. Right now, I am responsible for Scandinavia, the Baltics, so Estonia and Lithuania, France, South Africa, and the United Kingdom. And over here, you see my team, the Global Nutrition and Female Reproduction Services. And actually it is already in the name, but nutrition and female reproduction goes hand in hand together in a lot of cases. That's why we teamed up and now we are merged to one team. So here on the left you see our 2 female reproduction specialists, Julia Link-Moroni and Lydia Sparaini-Arends. And on the right part, you see the people responsible for nutrition. So that is Chris Opschoor, myself, Katalin Nikolajchuk, and Rodrigo Lima. So with the 5-6 of us, Chris Opschoor is at this moment also the director of the global team, which is called Global Technical Services. So we are one team of the big team. But he is still doing partly some nutrition tasks, and with the 5 of us we serve the global key accounts and clients in nutrition and female reproduction support. So to start the webinar, I will first introduce our strategy, which is called Modern Gilt Rearing. And in this slide, let me grab my pointer for you. So in this slide you see on the x-axis the age and on the y-axis the body weight in kilograms. And you see that the curve is like a S-shaped curve, which we call the Gompertz curve. In this graph you see actually all the items that matter in a gilt's life. So we start first actually on day -130. So maybe you're thinking, why do you start at -130 days? And I will show that in the next slide. So life starts with an egg cell and a sperm cell merging together into an embryo. And this actually is the same with the gilt rearing. Here already starts the gilt rearing strategy, because we are at this moment talking about the mother that will give birth to the gilt that we are following throughout its life. In this picture, hopefully I show it a little bit better. So here we see, we are actually talking about this situation. So you see the gilt, and she is pregnant of piglets. But this gilt was once also an embryo inside her mother's body. And there is actually where modern gilt rearing starts. We know that at the second part of lactation, the oocytes, so the egg cells that needs to be fertilized, are already getting ready for the fertilization so that they are released. And we know that in the second part of lactation, here the quality and the uniformity of those eggshells, or oocytes as we call them, are fertilized. So here we see that actually already the mother of the gilt determines the quality of the gilt that will give birth to the litters. So that's why we start at minus 130 days, because this is actually the cycle of the mother of the gilt. So the mother of the gilt gives at day 0 birth to a litter, and the gilt from that litter is the gilt that we are following. So at day 0 you have the gilt has a certain birth weight. So here you see the first factor that is of interest, which is birth weight. Then the gilt goes through a rearing period where it grows, where she develops to become the future mother. And here 2 items are of importance, namely the rearing period. So how is the growth curve? What kind of feed program is there? But also boar exposure to actually start up the whole axis from the brain to the gonads. Then we come to a point where we need flushing to optimize the follicle size and the quality. The quality is actually the size, but also the uniformity. And then she's inseminated. From insemination, she will go to gestation, where she will of course grow and the piglets will grow. And then she comes to a point where she has fulfilled the whole gestation period of around 115 days. Then she will give birth to the litter, so we call lactation. She will lose some weight, that's why you see the dark blue line is going a little bit down. So she will lose some weight. Of course she loses the piglets, she loses placenta, she loses fluids, but she also will lose some weight herself because she will give milk. And then the whole insemination, gestation, lactation repeats until the second lactation, and this continues for an X number of cycles. And during gilt rearing, as I already mentioned, and you saw that with the blocks in the graph, we have 6 important items that we believe as Topigs Norsvin are items of attention. And if you optimize these items, productivity of the herd will increase. So we start first with the litter of origin, then body weight development, boar exposure, flushing, gain during gestation, and weight loss during lactation. And I will discuss them all in this webinar. So first, litter of origin. So litter of origin means that this is the litter where the gilt is born in. And we know from research that small animals with a low birth weight within litters that also have heavier litter mates, they have a lower phenotypic survival. They also have a lower productivity, in this case weight gains, during all stages of their production cycle, so they will always be lower than the heavier litter mates. And we also know that the smaller animals are of greater risk of being removed from the herd. In this graph, you will see that the birth weight on the x-axis, and this is pre-weaning mortality on the y-axis, you see the heavier the piglet, the lower the pre-weaning mortality. So we know that pre-weaning mortality is dependent on birth weight. In this graph, you see different birth weight classes, and here on the y-axis you see the herd days from birth, so how long the pig stays in the herd. And you see that the class that is from 410 to 990 grams birth weight has a significantly lower herd days from birth compared to the group that is between 1 kilogram and 1.28 kilogram. And then we have the group that is more than 1.29 kilogram. And you see that the heavier the pigs are at birth, the longer they stay in the herd. So the number of days that a gilt remains in the herd is dependent on its birth weight. We also know that the birth weight has something to do with the ovarian weight, so how heavy the ovarian weight is. And we know that if a gilt is heavier, the ovarian weight related to the body weight of the gilts is heavier, meaning that this will also improve the results, the reproductive results in later life. What we also know is when pigs are born, the colostrum intake is really important, because a pig is born with almost no antibodies against pathogens. The energy storage is really small. A piglet has only 1 to 2% of body fat, and also a small storage of glycogen, which is the fast energy that a piglet needs. This is also why we put attention that colostrum intake is really important, and a piglet should stand in 3 minutes when it's born, and it should drink within 20 minutes after birth. So this is also that we want to point out, that this colostrum intake is really important. And here you see why. This is the IgG concentration, which is one type of antibodies in the colostrum of the sow. And you see the concentration starts with 100, and after 12 hours the concentration is 30. So this means that the concentration is decreased by 70% during the first 12 hours. So you see that actually the colostrum quality decreases very fast, and after 24 hours is just the IgG concentration is just 20. So this means that especially during those first, I would say the first 6 to 8 hours, you have the best colostrum quality. So it is important that the piglets get that colostrum. Here you see another research on colostrum intake. So one study followed piglets that were still alive at weaning or were dead before weaning. And you see the piglets that were alive at weaning consumed on average 339 grams of colostrum, while the piglets that are dead before weaning, so they died in the pre-weaning phase, they got 203 grams of colostrum intake. So you see a significant difference in colostrum intake. And here you also see that if more colostrum is consumed during the first 24 hours, the weight of the pigs is the highest, but also the gain, average daily gain, is the highest of those pigs. And you see this is a trend that increases. So colostrum intake, very important together with birth weight. Then we go to the second item, which is body weight development. So with body weight development, we value the growth weight, which is determined by the growth curve, and the feed program or strategy during gilt rearing. Here you see an example of the TN70 growth curve, and you see that it is a smooth line. There are no hiccups during the gilt rearing, and this is also what we want, because we want the gilt to just grow smoothly without hiccups that can also have a negative effect on leg quality. And you see here the body weight development, so the growth curve. So we have the days that they are in the gilt rearing with our Topigs Norsvin advice. What you also see here is that we have a general advice. We also have an advice for slow growers or fast growers, because we have an international manual with different systems, different health statuses. So to serve the global market, countries with a very high health status can use the fast grower curve. The countries that have a little more issues with, for example, mycotoxins or other issues, they can follow the slow grower curve. With this growth curve, there is also a feed program and strategy that we as Topigs Norsvin promote. So we promote a 3-phase rearing strategy during gilt rearing, where you have rearing 1 and a rearing 2 diet up to 100 kilograms. In this phase, you just let the gilt grow, and in the third part, you prepare her to become a future mother. This also means, a different premix, because a gilt is not a finisher, so she needs a different premix with additional minerals and vitamins that will support, for example, the reproductive organ development. And you also see here the pink boxes that highlight the calcium to digestible phosphorus ratio. This ratio should be around 2.7, 2.8, because then we focus on leg development, because we want gilts that stay in the herd for a longer time, and we call this longevity. And a higher ratio here will support that, because then more bone mineralization can take place. And I will explain that more in this slide. From research, this research is from Lee, Lagos and Stein from 2019. We know the lower the ratio to digestible calcium and digestible phosphorus, the more you focus on growth performance. So you see here the ratio is lower compared to the ratio where you focus on bone ash. So for example, if we take here the 11 to 25 kilograms, you see if you focus on growth performance, it should be lower than 1.4 to 1. While if you focus on bone mineralization, or here called bone ash, it's 1.7 to 1. So the higher the ratio, the more you focus on maximizing bone ash. Our advice from the Global Nutrition and Female Reproduction Services is that we highly value the focus on leg quality, and that's why in growing pigs, which a gilt is, you see we focus on a ratio of 2.7 to 2.8. So we are not neglecting growth, but we focus a little bit more on bone mineralization and in the end leg quality. Of course, next to the whole feed program strategy with lysine, energy, calcium and phosphorus, we also have advices on amino acids, vitamins and minerals. In the TN70 manual, we used various resources like CVB, DSM, NRC, and our objective is that we focus on a higher performance. We see due to genetic potential, which is the aim of the manual, we see that the performance is increasing. However, the feed intake is the same. So this means that also the diets are more dense compared to the past. But also the higher performance, more minerals, vitamins, amino acids are needed. And it's a recommendation for the next years because the manual is valid for 5 years. So that means actually 5 years of genetic potential. And as I said, in the first 2 diets, so up to that 100 kilogram, we focus on growth of the gilt. And in the last diet, we want to prepare her for the future, which will be a breeding sow. So we focus on more insemination items. Then we come to the part of boar exposure, which will we call this early boar exposure because it will take place in the gilt rearing phase. And we know that boar exposure is a critical factor influencing puberty attainment in gilts. So if you use the early boar exposure, which we recommend, be mindful that you use a high libido boar of at least 10 months old. The boar needs to have a puberty to be like, he needs to smell, the saliva with the pheromones needs to be there. So that's why we say at least 10 months old. And it's a boar that needs to be active because the purpose of the boar is to stimulate those gilts. We also advise to use daily direct exposure to mature boars. And we say a minimum of 10 to 15 minutes per day. Also important is to rotate the boars, so not use only one boar every time, but use different boars. And also house the boars not in the gilt rearing section because the boar needs to be a surprise for the gilts. And plan and establish a boar replacement program because also the boars need to be replaced at some time. Then we have the whole gilt rearing part, and then she is entering or a regimate period, or she's put in an insemination barn. And then we advise flushing. And what is flushing? So with flushing, we try to increase the quality of the oocytes. And quality in this case would be the size of the oocytes and the uniformity. Energy is a source that you can use, and it should originate from starch and sugar, so not from fat. Addition of dextrose can have positive effects on piglet vitality, and then the advice would be 150 to 250 grams per day. And additional minerals and vitamins can be provided. In this case, vitamin A, vitamin E, because vitamin E is an important antioxidant, and vitamin B12. And also folic acid is known to have positive effects on the reproductive tract. So the do's when using a flush diet: develop a special flush feed to flush the gilts. Start flushing the gilts 10 to 14 days prior to insemination to have those higher energy peaks, in the end also insulin, and work on those oocytes to improve their quality. Also, feed intake is really important, and to increase feed intake, feed multiple times per day, and of course provide water ad libitum to the gills. Then we come to the insemination part. Here you see the insemination targets for the TN70. So the weight target is between 150 and 170 kilograms with an age of 210 to 240 days. So this means that the lifetime growth weight would be more than 650 grams per day. We don't mention an upper limit, however prevent overdevelopment, and I will explain later on why. And if you look at the heat, please inseminate at least at the second or third heat and not on the first heat, because we know that the reproductive performance on the first heat are lower than you inseminate on the second or third heat. Here you see some data from the Netherlands. You see that we inseminated the gills in different weight classes. If you look at the blue arrows, which is around 160 kilograms and 175 kilograms, you see that the retention rate, so how many animals still are in the herd, is the highest, so above 85%. So using this boundary for the Netherlands inseminates on average a little heavier than what is internationally done. But you see the retention rate is the highest in that category. Here in this slide, I show you the consequences of inseminating outside the given targets. So first talking about underdeveloped gills. So if you inseminate lower than 150 kilogram, you see that the gilt is less mature in the farrowing room. This in the end have an impact on the feed intake of that gilt, which will be lower. And that means that insufficient body reserves and body weight losses will occur. So she will use more of her body weight to make milk for the piglets, and that has a negative influence on the second parity. So this is the first cascade, and this has a negative result on mammary development, because we know it will be more poor in the next cycles, and you also compromise milk production in the following parities. You also see that the higher body condition losses in the first lactation will also result in a poor follicle development at weaning. This can cause a delayed estrus or heat after weaning. This has an influence on the embryo development, and then the gilt, or then she is a second parity. She will have a higher risk for a second parity dip with a lower total number born. So this all will negatively influence the lifetime productivity. On the other side, you can also have overdeveloped gills. For the TN70, this means higher than 170 kilograms of body weight. The negative consequences here are that the sow's maintenance is increased because she has a heavier body weight. She also needs more feed to have the maintenance level. The sow herd feed efficiency is decreased. She will have the risk to refuse feed in lactation because she is more heavier. Because she is heavier, she will also have an increased risk for lameness, which will in the end reduce her longevity in the herd. She will also have farrowing difficulties because she is more fat. The farrowing process can take longer, and this can increase stillborn piglets. Then the fifth item that is important during gilt rearing is the weight gain during gestation. So we call this the feeding program to ensure weight gain. This is some data from the Netherlands. It's a field trial from 2016. And you see that there are different classes, less than 60 kilograms of weight gain, 60 to 70 kilograms of weight gain, 70 to 80 kilograms of weight gain, or more than 80 kilograms of weight gain during gestation. So you see that different gilts have different weight gains. In total, we had 243 gilts, and we have the growth during gestation, we have reproductive data and weight data. And what we see in the end, this is statistically proven. You see that the group that has 70 to 80 kilograms or more than 80 kilograms had a higher total number born and born alive compared to the other group that was lower than 70 kilograms of body weight gain. And in the end, you see also that the weaned per litter was higher. Please be in mind that this was 2016. So at this moment, you see that also the wean per litter in the modern genetics is a little bit higher than what you see here, but the concept still applies. And that's also why we as Topigs Norsvin highly respect that 70 kilogram of body weight gain during the gestation. And you see that here. So our insemination targets, which I showed you a few slides before, were 150 to 170 kilograms of body weight. So if we take there the average, it would be 160 kilograms. And here you see the average would be 230 kilograms farrowing weight. So here you see that we indeed highlight that 70 kilograms of growth during gestation. You also see that there is a back fat development, and at weaning the gilt or the sow in that sense has lost some weight, and weight loss is not a bad thing. However, we should minimize the weight loss, and of course you will also lose back fat. So to ensure that weight gain, we have in the TN70 manuals 3 phases: 0 to 35, 35 to 85, and 85 to 110. And why 110? Because normally the gilts are put a few days before the farrowing day inside the farrowing room. We have for parity 1, parity 2, parity 3, and parity 4 and older requirement. We calculated this with our sow model. So you see that we also, we call this precision feeding, because the requirements of a gilt are completely different than requirements of a 4th parity sow. And in the first 35 days, so that would be this part, we are very practical, and we saw that in this first 5 weeks the recovery needs to be done for when they are coming out of the farrowing room, go to the insemination, and then the first part of gestation is for that recovery of the previous gestation, the previous lactation period. If we look at the diets and the feed curves, our diets are developed based on the requirements, which I showed you before. Of course, practical experience, and also the ratio of the digestible lysine to the net energy ratio. So you see here that we have 2 gestation diets, a gestation 1 and a gestation 2. The gestation 1 is a little bit lower in SID lysine to net energy, and in the second phase you see this diet is a little bit more dense. And we advise to use gestation 1 for the first 2 phases of gestation, and in the last phase where you see that those fetuses require more nutrients, we advise to use the higher dense diet. And if you want to calculate the feed curves, divide the requirements by the diets that you're using, and then you know how much you should feed per different phase. You see also in this, I have this in the next slide, yes. What I also want to show you is that this would be for a gilt that has finished her first lactation. So then she is a sow, and in the next gestation, so the second gestation, she needs to recover from the previous lactation. Here you can feed a little lower, because in this phase, slowly the nutrient for mammary development, for the uterus, for the fetuses is increasing, but it's not that high. And you see in the last phase, it is really increasing the nutrient demands for the fetuses, the mammary gland and the uterus. However, a gilt does not need to recover from a previous lactation because she didn't have one. So for a gilt, we use the step-up curve. So you see that we go from lower to a little higher to more high, because also here her piglets are requiring more nutrients, but the gilt herself is also growing. We call that maternal gain. And we can also have a situation where a sow lost quite some weight during lactation. She needs to recover a little bit more. So you see that the feed curve can be in the beginning a little higher for a sow that I used in my example. So a sow that lost quite some weight. You can put her on a skinny curve, which means that she needs a little bit more recovery in the first period. Then we have the weight loss during lactation. This is the last part. And here you see why we have this as a last part. This is from Klaus from 2003, so it's a pretty old article because now we are in 2024. However, the concept still applies nowadays. So what the researcher investigated is that sows with a moderate gilts with a moderate body weight, so 165 kilogram at first farrowing, had actually during lactation a moderate body weight loss of 70 kilograms or a high body weight loss of 23 kilograms. You see here the follicle size at weaning of those gilts. Purple means higher than 3.5 millimeters, blue means less than 3.5 millimeters. And of course we want higher, like bigger follicles, because we know the quality is better. So you see the group that lost a lot of weight during lactation also have higher, smaller follicles and lower, bigger follicles. And the group that lost a moderate amount has more bigger follicles. So that's what we want. This research was repeated, but then for gilts that had a higher body weight at first farrowing. And the same concept applies here, a moderate body weight loss or gilts with a high body weight loss. You see the same concept. The high body weight loss had higher, smaller follicles compared to the group that had a moderate body weight loss. And this group also had more bigger follicles, which we want. But if you compare this group with this group, you see overall that the purple bars are higher in the group that had a higher farrowing weight compared to the ones that had a lower farrowing rate. So here comes our statement, which is that we as Topigs Norsvin feel that both body weight development during gestation, which in the end determines the farrowing weight, and the body weight loss during lactation have a big impact on follicle development and therefore on embryo quality and eventually on piglet vitality. This is a second article that gives us proof that this body weight loss during lactation is really important to minimize this. This research is done on TN70 sows, where in the first parity the sows were followed on weight development but also on reproductive development, and in the second parity they were also followed on these items. So what you see, this researcher made 3 weight loss categories. One group that lost less than 6% weight loss, a group that lost between 6 and 12% weight loss, and a group that lost more than 12% weight loss in the first parity. What you see if we look at the second parity, the number born alive for the gilts that lost in the first parity less than 6% weight loss or between 6 and 12% weight loss were higher compared to the one that lost more than 12% weight loss. And that's also why we tell that you should not go higher than 10% body weight loss in the TN70 manual, because we know the subsequent litter, in this case the second parity, the reproductive performance is lower, which we call then a second parity dip. So in the manual we give requirements for 21, 28 and 35 days of lactation, and also with different litter gains, so how many kilograms per day the whole litter is gaining. So you see we have from 2.1 to 2.5 kilograms per day. And as you see, per parity, the requirements differ. So our minimum is 3.1 kilograms per day, because we know we do have good weaning weights on our piglets, and we also strive clients to do better. That's why 3.1 is the minimum. And the diet program and feed curve is that we have we advise one lactation diet. We have one for the wheat, barley, soy markets and one for the corn, soy markets, with a litter gain of 3.1 kilograms a day. And you see that we have a nutrient recommendation for gilts and one for sows. And we always want to have the best milk production. That's the goal. And the average daily feed intake is the average daily feed intake over the whole lactation period, and not the maximum feed intake. So that's good to take that into account. If you look at the feed curve, we have a feed curve for gilts and a feed curve for sows. You see the gilts, they start a little lower than the sows, so we do not want to overfeed the gilts too easily. And here you see we build a rest day in to not overload the gilts and the sows, because if you overload them, they stop eating and you should go back with the building up again, and there you lose a lot of nutrients that the sow and gilt need. So that's why we build in a rest period. So if we look at the take-home messages for the first part on modern gilt rearing, the manual is based on achieving genetic potential. That's good to take into account. We advise to invest in a proper gilt rearing strategy, and as I explained in the first slide, it starts at day -130, so when actually the mother is an oocyte inside her mother of the gilt of interest, and it ends at weaning of the first lactation. And body condition is key during rearing, during gestation with that 70 kilograms of weight gain, and during the lactation, where we advise to minimize the body weight loss to a maximum of 10%. And now we have come to the second part of my webinar, which will be about finishers, more specifically the TN Duroc. Here is the TN Duroc. So today's program, I'm sorry, I see that this is not correct. But today's program is that I will first show you a little bit of the breeding goal, then the requirements of the tea and duroc and the feed strategy, and then I will have also some take-home messages for you on the tea and duroc part. Here you see the breeding goal of our tea and duroc in 2024, so this year. And today in the breeding goal, 28 different traits are included. So you see them here in this pie chart. As you can see, we focus a lot on the robustness and the finisher efficiency in the finisher, in our sire line, the tea and duroc. And the focus shifted more towards the finisher efficiency and the meat quality in the tea and duroc. And here you see our tea and duroc manual developed by the Global Nutrition Services, so that would be my team. And in the manual we provide practical feeding tips for achieving genetic potential. As I told you in the TN70 manual, this is always our core goal because we are a genetic company. Every day actually genetically the animals are improving, so we make a manual to achieve genetic potential. We also provide nutrient requirements. We do a lot of trials to come up in the end with this kind of manual, and besides that we also give practical information how to optimal feed the tea and duroc times TN70 offspring. That's where this manual is based on. As I said, before we develop a manual like this, we use a trial to gather data on the weight, the back fat, the feed intake, and with all that information, the research department of Topigs Norsvin helps us calculating the daily requirements, and in the end we can come up with diets we practically know, but also we know from our modeling gives the best results on the tea and duroc progeny. And here in this slide you see our daily requirements for tea and duroc finishers. We give it the daily requirements we give for castrates, gilts and boars. And as you can see, we start with the body weight over time, and here with the different energy requirements and digestible lysine requirements. And we do that for gilts and boars as well. If you look at the implementation, so how you should implement this information, we use these diet recommendations based on farm feed intake. So that one is given in this slide. So you see per different phase we have an average daily feed intake. So as also said in the first part, we believe in precision feeding, and over here you also see that we have 5 different phases where we see that the daily requirements are shifting and a different nutrient recommendations are needed. So the starter diet is from 25 to 35 kilograms, then we have a grower 1 to 55 kilograms and a grower 2 to 75 kilograms, a finisher diet up to 100 kilograms and a final diet up to 130 kilograms. Practically I see a lot of tree diets that are used for the finishers. So with a 3-phase diet we know that you can you can achieve very good results. So what I normally see is that people have a starter, a grower and then a finisher for the last 2 periods. So you see here the energy requirements. This is an example for boars. Then you see the lysine requirements with again the ratio, which tells you something on how dense the diet is in terms of digestible lysine to net energy. And you see calcium and digestible phosphorus levels. And in the end, if you calculate this ratio, we are at a ratio around 2.6 to 2.7 to again promote leg quality, because in the end the finishers need to walk to the truck properly without any leg issues, but also we don't want to neglect growth. And how to calculate or how to advise the diet to be fed. So our first base, what we always use when we are developing a manual, the first thing we always look at requirements. So from the requirements, you can calculate what is needed in the diet. So do you know the feed intake? If yes, you can calculate your own diets that the pigs need. If you don't know the feed intake of the finishers, we advise to use the recommended diets that are shown in the appendix in the manual, and that's actually what I showed you in the previous slide. So you can then calculate with an average feed intake that we calculated for you. So of course, if you want to improve the results of the finishers, please control the incoming raw materials. We know that for example, if we look at the grains, mycotoxins can be a risk. So that's why we advise to control the incoming raw materials. Formulate as close as possible to the requirements. And we also advise to use the split sex feeding, which means that you split the males and the females from each other, because then you can more specifically feed to their needs. Because we know boars and gilts and castrates have different needs and also different feed intakes. Formulate based on the recommendations of the genetic supplier. As I told you, we focus on genetic potential, and the closer you are to our recommendations, the more you benefit from this genetic potential. Next to that, control the feed intake and weight of pigs. I would highly suggest to weigh some animals of the pens to see where you are on the growth curve, if you are on par or not. And also the feed intake. Sometimes it's good to know of the farm yourself, what the pigs eat, and if it's actually what you were thinking, or what we as Topigs Norsvin what we advise. If you are lower or higher, you can adjust then the strategy of for example, the density of the feed. So then you can adapt according to the situation on your farm. And lastly, it seems very logical and easy, but I want to highlight this: a good start is a good finish. And here I want to highlight the nursery period. I didn't speak about nursery in this webinar, but we know in a nursery, if you can minimize the weaning dip, if they start up really easily with eating the weaner diet, with drinking enough water, with a right climate, we know that also in the finisher phase it goes more smoothly. So this is what I want to highlight here to improve the results of your finishers. So the take-home message here: the T-Enduro Progeny Manual is based on achieving genetic potential, and here in terms of daily gain and feed conversion. So it's not to achieve the leanest carcasses for the T-Enduro, but as you also saw in the breeding goal, we focus more on meat quality. And please be mindful that it's not always the lowest price per kilogram feed in our manual, because the lowest diets are not always supporting the best genetic potential. That's why we stay away from the lowest price per kilogram feed, and we focus on genetic potential. The TN Duroc progeny is different compared to other genetics, even compared to Topigs Norsvin genetic lines. So this means that also the requirements are different. Then focus on daily requirements. As I told you, this is always our starting point. And from the daily requirements with a known feed intake or unknown feed intake, you can find example diets in the appendix of the TN Duroc manual. And a good implementation by using the basic assumptions is essential and a key attention point to unlock the genetic potential of your finishers. By that, I came to the end of the webinar. I hope you enjoyed the webinar, and as I said before, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. And I see that I don't put my email address here, but Jonas knows my email address, so he can give it to you. And I hope you have a really nice day, and hope to see you maybe in person in the future. Have a good day. Bye bye.